At my husband Arthur's memorial, his son's wife, Cassandra, loudly whispered about taking over his company. She was already measuring his office for curtains. I just sat there, my heart aching, but a fire igniting inside me. When the will was read, their faces dropped. You won't believe what Arthur did. Like, share, and tell me where you're listening from. I need to know how far my story reaches. The scent of lilies hung heavy in the air, a cruel reminder of the finality of Arthur's passing. I sat in the front row, a widow in black, my grief a tangible weight pressing down on my chest. The memorial service was drawing to a close, but the solemn quiet was suddenly, jarringly broken by a whisper from behind me. It wasn't meant for my ears, yet it sliced through the hushed reverence like a sharp knife. At least the company now belongs to my husband. Cassandra, my stepson Daniel's wife, murmured loud enough to reach me. The words were a stark betrayal of the sanctity of the moment, a chilling dismissal of the man we were there to honor. My gaze drifted to Daniel and Cassandra, who sat a few rows back, a little too composed for the occasion. Later, I saw them huddled conspiratorially in a quiet corner of the reception hall, their heads bent close to Victor Sterling, Arthur's longtime business partner. Victor, usually so reserved, looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight. A flicker of unease went through me. This wasn't mourning. This felt like plotting. My daughter Chloe, a beacon of strength and comfort, arrived a little late, slipping into the seat beside me and gently squeezing my hand. Her eyes, usually so bright, held a knowing sadness as she looked at me. "Mom," she whispered, her voice laced with concern. "I heard Cassandra talking earlier. She's already eager to measure the curtains in Arthur's office." The revelation hit me with a cold certainty. It wasn't just a whisper, it was a plan, already in motion, disrespecting Arthur's memory before his body was even laid to rest. For decades, I had implicitly trusted Arthur with the intricacies of his business, Stanford Construction. He was the visionary, the strategist. I managed our home, our life, always believing he had everything under control. We had discussed our future, our retirement, but never the detailed succession plan for the company. Now, as I sat enveloped by a grief that felt tainted by this new, insidious layer of betrayal, I deeply regretted not knowing more, not insisting on being included in those crucial discussions. The thought that Arthur might have left his life's work to Daniel, who had always shown more interest in spending money than earning it, felt like a fresh wound. After the memorial, I retreated to Arthur's study, a sanctuary that now felt hollow and cold without him. The scent of his pipe tobacco still lingered faintly, a ghost of his presence. I ran my hand over the polished mahogany of his desk, memories flooding back, each one bringing a fresh wave of tears. It wasn't just his physical absence, but the sudden, stark realization that I might have been foolishly naive about the people around him, even his own son. The pain of perceived betrayal, layered on top of my raw grief, felt unbearable. But as the tears subsided, a stubborn, unfamiliar seed of determination began to form in the quiet corners of my mind. I wouldn't just sit by. The next morning, the air in Mr. Harrison's law office was thick with a tense expectation. Daniel, Cassandra, Chloe, and I sat stiffly, waiting. Mr. Harrison, Arthur's longtime attorney, a man whose face usually held a kind, avuncular expression, looked unusually grim as he cleared his throat and began. The drone of his voice filled the room, detailing clauses and legal jargon until he reached the heart of the matter. "I shall now read the provisions concerning Stanford Construction," he announced, adjusting his spectacles. "To my beloved wife, Evelyn Stanford, I bequeath all shares and controlling interest in Stanford Construction, with immediate effect." A stunned silence descended upon the room. My heart stopped. I felt a dizzying mix of shock and utter disbelief. Then Daniel's voice, high and strangled, broke the stillness. "What? No, that's impossible. My father always told me I would inherit the company. He promised me." He looked at Mr. Harrison, then at me, his face a mask of furious indignation. My eyes, which had been fixed on Mr. Harrison, slowly turned to meet Cassandra's. Her face, usually so animated and sharp, had drained of all color, leaving her pale and ghostly. A forced, syrupy smile, more a grimace, stretched across her lips, trying desperately to mask the shock and fury that I could clearly see simmering beneath the surface. It was a smile that didn't reach her eyes, which were fixed on me with a venomous intensity. Mr. Harrison calmly let Daniel's outburst settle before continuing. Arthur also left a few additional private letters, one for each of you. He reached into a folder and handed me a sealed envelope, thick and heavy, bearing Arthur's distinctive handwriting. As I tore it open, my hands trembled. The letter inside was Arthur's voice, clear and strong, speaking to me from beyond the grave. My eyes scanned the familiar script, tear blotting the words as I read. My dearest Evelyn, if you are reading this, I am no longer with you. I know this news may come as a shock, but I discovered certain financial diversions orchestrated by Daniel and Cassandra. It broke my heart, but it also cemented my decision. You, my Evelyn, possess integrity, wisdom, and a quiet strength I always admired. I trust you, and only you, to protect my legacy, Stanford Construction, from those who would exploit it for their own gain. You may feel unprepared, but I have faith in you. Do what is right, my love. A folder filled with documents, meticulous financial records, fell from the envelope. Evidence, it was all there. Cassandra, having seemingly recovered her composure, though her smile remained stiff, piped up with a condescending sweetness. Well, Evelyn, dear, that's quite a surprise. But I'm sure you'll find someone competent to manage the company for you. After all, business isn't really your forte, is it? Her words, intended to diminish me, instead ignited a slow-burning indignation, a fierce resolve within me. She had no idea the fire Arthur's letter had just lit. Chloe, ever perceptive, sensing my internal struggle, put a reassuring hand on my arm. Charles, Arthur's longtime financial advisor and a man I greatly respected, gave me a subtle nod of encouragement. Taking a deep breath, I met Cassandra's gaze, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. Thank you, Cassandra, I said. But Arthur clearly trusted me to make these decisions. I intend to consider my options carefully. I will not be immediately transferring management to anyone. Daniel and Cassandra, their faces a mixture of disbelief and barely controlled rage, rose to leave. As Cassandra brushed past me, her voice dropped to a chilling whisper, meant only for my ears. This isn't over, Evelyn. You have no idea what you're doing. I watched them go, the heavy letter still clutched in my hand, the folder of damning evidence resting on my lap. My heart was torn between the fresh wave of grief for Arthur and the profound sense of betrayal by his son. But beneath it all, a newfound resolve was hardening. Cassandra was right about one thing. I had no idea what I was doing, but I was about to learn. The silence in Mr. Harrison's office, after Daniel and Cassandra's furious exit, was almost as deafening as their earlier protests. My mind reeled, controlling interest in Stanford Construction. Me. It felt like an impossible weight, a cruel trick of fate. Chloe, ever my rock, stayed by my side. Mom, she said softly, her voice filled with a gentle concern. Are you all right? I shook my head, the gesture small and weary. No, sweetie, I'm not. I need to understand this, all of it. Daniel's reaction, Cassandra's, the evidence Arthur left. It feels like a nightmare I can't wake up from. Mr. Harrison, a man who had seen much in his decades of legal practice, looked at me with a somber expression. Evelyn, Arthur was incredibly thorough. He spent the last few months of his life meticulously documenting everything. These documents, he said, gesturing to the folder still resting on my lap, contain truths that will be difficult to confront. Arthur felt it was imperative that you understand the full extent of what was happening. His words were a grim confirmation, a foreshadowing of the pain to come. I returned to my quiet, cavernous house, the folder still unopened. For 3 days it sat on the gleaming surface of my kitchen table, a silent, menacing testament to my stepson's betrayal. I would walk past it, my gaze lingering, then quickly avert my eyes. It was a physical manifestation of the ugly truth I wasn't ready to face. During those days, the house felt emptier than ever. Arthur's presence, which had always filled every corner, was now just an aching void. I walked through the rooms, touching familiar objects, each one a memory, each memory a fresh wave of grief. The shock of Arthur's death, the unexpected twist of his will, and now the weight of Stanford Construction's future resting solely on my shoulders. It was an overwhelming tide threatening to pull me under. I mourned my husband, I mourned the innocence of my belief in his son, and I mourned the life I thought I knew. The quiet hours were filled with a chaotic internal dialogue, a desperate search for answers and strength. On the evening of the third day, a quiet resolve settled over me. I couldn't postpone it any longer. With a deep, shuddering breath, I reached for the folder. My fingers trembled as I untied the string closure. The contents were devastating. Bank statements, transfer records, meticulously detailed spreadsheets, and printouts of email exchanges, all spanning the last 2 years. Arthur hadn't missed a single detail. My eyes scanned the numbers, then reread them, disbelieving. Nearly $300,000, siphoned off. It was disguised as payments to obscure vendors, inflated consultant fees for non-existent services, and suspicious invoices from shell companies. Each entry was a punch to the gut. This wasn't petty theft. This was a sophisticated, calculated embezzlement. Then I found them. The emails. An exchange between Daniel and Cassandra. The dates were clear, just weeks after Arthur's initial cancer diagnosis. My breath hitched in my throat as I read their cold, clinical words. They weren't just aware of Arthur's illness, they were factoring his potential death into their schemes, discussing accelerated timelines, how much they could extract before the inevitable. "He won't last much longer," Daniel had written. "We need to secure our future before he makes any rash decisions." Cassandra's reply was equally chilling. "Agreed. Let's maximize this window." The sheer betrayal, the calculated cruelty, the utter lack of humanity hit me with a force that stole my breath. This was my own stepson, the boy Arthur had raised, the boy I had loved and nurtured. He had seen his father's illness not as a tragedy, but as an opportunity. A wave of nausea washed over me, hot and sickening. I stumbled to the kitchen sink, retching, the taste of bile bitter in my mouth. My tears mixed with the sweat on my face. But these weren't tears of sorrow. They were tears of pure, unadulterated rage. My son. No, not my son. Arthur's son, who had betrayed his father in the cruelest way imaginable. That night, after the storm of anger and disgust had somewhat subsided, a crucial decision formed in my mind. I wouldn't let them win. I found Arthur's old Rolodex, its leather worn smooth from years of use, and searched for a name. Dr. Lena Chen. A business consultant Arthur had occasionally mentioned, someone he admired for her sharp mind and no-nonsense approach. With a newfound resolve, I dialed her number. Dr. Lena Chen's office was sleek and modern, a stark contrast to the old-world charm of Arthur's study. She was exactly as Arthur had described, intelligent, direct, with kind eyes that nonetheless held a formidable sharpness. I laid out the entire situation, my voice surprisingly steady. The reading of the will, Daniel and Cassandra's reaction, the devastating contents of the folder. And then, the admission. "Dr. Chen, I have no experience. I've been a homemaker for 40 years. I don't know the first thing about running a construction company." The words hung in the air, heavy with my inadequacy. Dr. Chen listened patiently, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she surprised me with a gentle smile. "Evelyn, Arthur spoke of you often, not just as his wife, but as a woman of incredible intuition and strength. Do you remember when Stanford Construction was just starting? Before it was Stanford Construction?" I frowned, trying to recall. "Vaguely, a small operation, Arthur working out of our garage, taking on small residential projects. And who helped him with the initial paperwork? The client communications? The budget spreadsheets he needed to secure his first small loan?" She pressed, her gaze unwavering. A memory, long buried under decades of domesticity, resurfaced. I had indeed helped him. Late nights, coffee, balancing the checkbook, organizing his crude invoices. I did, a little, I admitted, a flicker of that long-forgotten confidence stirring. "Arthur said you had a knack for it," Dr. Chen confirmed, a warmth in her voice. "He always trusted your instincts. He believed you had a strong business mind, even if you never pursued it. And Evelyn, you have time and capability. I believe you can learn to run this company yourself." Her words were like the balm, a spark of hope in the overwhelming darkness. But then the other painful reality resurfaced. If I pursue this, if I use this evidence, I swallowed hard. Daniel, he could go to prison. The thought was a chilling echo of Cassandra's earlier threat. Dr. Chen nodded gravely. That is a very real possibility, Evelyn. You have to be prepared for that. But you also have to protect Arthur's legacy and your own future. And perhaps even Daniel's future from himself. Sometimes consequences are the only way to truly learn. The path ahead was still shrouded in uncertainty, fraught with emotional landmines. But with Dr. Chen's quiet assurance and Arthur's enduring faith in me, I felt a strength I hadn't known I possessed. All right, I said, my voice firming. Tell me what I need to do. I'll start learning. The weeks that followed Arthur's memorial and the explosive will reading transformed into a whirlwind of intense, often exhausting, learning. My days were meticulously structured. Mornings were dedicated to Dr. Lena Chen, who had proven to be an exceptional mentor. She patiently walked me through financial statements, market analysis, legal compliance, and the intricate dance of project management. She provided me with reading materials, assigned tasks, and gently but firmly pushed me beyond my comfort zone. It was like going back to school, but with infinitely higher stakes. In the afternoons, I ventured into the heart of Stanford construction. The bustling office, once a place I rarely visited, now became my classroom. I diligently met every employee, from the front desk receptionist to the most seasoned project manager. I reviewed active projects, pored over contracts, and scrutinized financial reports. I asked countless questions, sometimes feeling foolish, but I absorbed every detail, every piece of information, like a sponge. The employees, initially wary, began to open up, sharing their insights and concerns. It was clear many had felt the shift in atmosphere during Arthur's illness, a subtle decline in leadership and focus. Meanwhile, Daniel and Cassandra, despite their earlier fury, had pivoted to a new strategy. Daniel began making daily conciliatory calls, his voice dripping with an artificial warmth. "Mom, how are you doing? I'm so worried about you." He'd suggest dinners, family outings, always emphasizing how much he missed me. My heart ached at the mention of my grandchildren, Clara and Leo. They were innocent in all of this, and I desperately missed their laughter and their hugs. It was a cruel manipulation, using my love for them as leverage, but I endured it for the hope of seeing them. The first of these obligatory Friday dinners took place at Daniel and Cassandra's immaculate, yet strangely cold, home. Everything was perfectly arranged, from the crystal glasses to the meticulously folded napkins, yet it lacked the warmth and lived-in comfort of a true family home. Throughout the meal, I observed them closely. There was a subtle, almost imperceptible communication between Daniel and Cassandra, a glance here, a slight nod there, a synchronized shifting of posture. They were like two performers on a stage playing a carefully rehearsed scene. As dinner progressed and the initial pleasantries faded, Daniel eased into their agenda. "Mom," he began, his tone softened with feigned concern. "You know, Dad always had such passion for Stanford construction. It was his life, his legacy." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "We all want to honor that, don't we? It's just, with everything going on and with your lack of direct experience in the industry, it might be best for the company if you retained ownership, of course, but perhaps stepped aside from the day-to-day operations. For Arthur's legacy, you understand." Cassandra smoothly reinforced his points, her voice laced with what she clearly intended as sympathetic understanding. "Exactly, Evelyn. It's a very demanding business. And you've always been such a wonderful homemaker, so skilled in other areas. We wouldn't want you to be overwhelmed or for anything to happen to the company Dad worked so hard to build. The risk is just too high, isn't it?" She leaned forward, her eyes bright with a predatory glint she tried to disguise as concern. I responded neutrally, my carefully constructed calm a shield against their thinly veiled attacks. "I appreciate your concern, both of you," I said, taking a sip of water. "Arthur left the company to me, and I take that responsibility very seriously. I'm exploring all my options." I then skillfully deflected, changing the subject to something innocuous, like the local garden club's upcoming fundraiser, or a new exhibit at the museum. Their smiles tightened, their eyes betraying a hint of frustration at my evasiveness. With each passing week, These Friday dinners became a ritual. And with each dinner, I noticed Cassandra's polite mask slipping a little more. The forced sweetness in her voice began to crack, replaced by a sharper edge. Her smiles became less convincing, her impatience growing more evident when I continued to parry their suggestions without committing to anything. Daniel, too, grew more insistent, his voice losing its conciliatory tone and gaining a subtle undercurrent of annoyance. What they didn't know, couldn't have possibly imagined, was the transformation happening within me during the week. To my own astonishment, I was discovering a natural aptitude for the business. Numbers that once seemed like an indecipherable language were now beginning to make sense. I could spot discrepancies, identify potential efficiencies, and even offer fresh perspectives that surprised the longtime employees. One afternoon, while reviewing a complex project bid, I noticed a detail in the material costs that seemed off. I questioned Liam, the head estimator, a man known for his meticulousness. He initially dismissed it, but I persisted, pointing to specific figures and market trends that Chen had taught me to identify. He re-examined his calculations and, to his evident surprise, found a significant error that would have cost the company thousands. "Mrs. Stanford," he said, his voice tinged with respect, "you have a keen eye, a very keen eye." Later, during one of our morning sessions, I shared this anecdote with Dr. Lena Chen. She smiled, a genuine warmth in her eyes. "See, Evelyn, I told you, Arthur saw it in you. You're a natural. You think strategically, you ask the right questions, and you have excellent instincts. Don't underestimate yourself." Her words were a powerful validation, affirming Arthur's faith in my nascent abilities. The realization settled deep within me. Daniel and Cassandra's polite charade was merely a tactic, a temporary measure. It was designed to wear me down, to pressure me into relinquishing control voluntarily. But it wouldn't last indefinitely. Their patience was wearing thin, and soon I knew they would escalate their efforts. I had to be ready. The game was on, and I was no longer an unwitting participant. I was a player, learning the rules, and slowly, surely, mastering the board. The calm, collected facade I had carefully cultivated began to crack with a single phone call. It was late morning, and I was deeply engrossed in reviewing Stanford Construction's recent earnings reports when my cell phone chimed. The caller ID showed Dr. Evans, our longtime family physician. A knot of apprehension tightened in my stomach. "Evelyn, thank you for taking my call," Dr. Evans began, his voice unusually grave. "I'm calling about Daniel. He paid me a visit yesterday and, well, I'm rather concerned." "Concerned about Daniel?" I asked, confused. "No, Evelyn," he clarified, concerned about you. "Daniel made some rather alarming claims. He insisted you were suffering from severe depression, exhibiting signs of memory loss, confusion. He even suggested early dementia. He was quite insistent on referring you to a geriatric specialist immediately to assess your mental competence." A surge of cold, chilling anger spread through me, like ice water being poured directly into my veins. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. This wasn't about concern for my well-being. It was a calculated, insidious strategy. Declare me incompetent, strip me of my autonomy, and by extension, strip me of Stanford Construction. The polite dinners, the feigned concern, it was all a preamble to this. They hadn't just grown impatient. They had grown desperate and dangerous. "Did you agree to it, doctor?" I asked, my voice tight with barely suppressed fury. "I told him I would need to speak with you directly and conduct my own assessment first." Evans reassured me, sensing the shift in my tone. "I know you, Evelyn. I've been your doctor for 30 years. What he describes simply doesn't align with the Evelyn I know. I felt I needed to warn you." "Thank you, doctor. Thank you so much," I managed, my gratitude mixed with a profound sense of dread. Later that evening, as if to solidify my worst fears, a text message arrived from Cassandra. "Dearest Evelyn, just confirming your appointment with Dr. Albright, the geriatric specialist, next Tuesday at 10 a.m. Daniel and I will be happy to drive you there. We just want what's best for you." The syrupy sweetness of the message was a thin veil over the blatant coercion, a confirmation of their malicious plot. They were moving quickly. I didn't hesitate. I immediately contacted Mr. Harrison. His calm, legalistic voice was a steadying presence as I recounted Dr. Evans's call and Cassandra's text. Mr. Harrison, they're trying to declare me incompetent, I said, the words heavy with the weight of the accusation against my own stepson. They want to strip me of everything, the company, my dignity. Mr. Harrison listened intently. Evelyn, this is a serious escalation. It confirms my earlier suspicions about their true intentions. From this moment forward, you must meticulously document every interaction, every conversation, every wahatan, and every email with Daniel and Cassandra. Dates, hems, content. Keep a detailed log. And Evelyn, his voice lowered, a chillingly serious tone entering it, be extremely careful what you eat or drink at their house, or anywhere else they might offer it to you. The implication hung in the air, cold and stark. The thought of my own son, Arthur's son, potentially drugging me to achieve his greedy aims was a venomous twist in my gut. It kept me awake that night, staring at the ceiling, my mind a turbulent sea of disbelief, hurt, and a fierce, protective anger. Not just for myself, but for Arthur's legacy. He had left Stanford Construction to me to protect it from exactly this kind of predatory behavior. I would not fail him. In the darkness of that long night, a decisive plan began to form. I would confront them, but it would be on my terms, not theirs. No more polite deflections at their carefully orchestrated dinners. The time for subtlety was over. The stage for this confrontation would be my home, a place of comfort and safety for me, but a place where their manipulations would be exposed for all to see. The next morning, with a new steeliness in my resolve, I started making calls. First to Chloe, explaining the sinister developments, her shock and fury mirroring my own. Then to Charles, Arthur's trusted financial advisor, whose counsel I valued deeply. And then a bold move. I called Cassandra's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Davies. They were good, honest people, pillars of their community, and I knew they would be mortified by their daughter and son-in-law's actions. I simply told them I was having a small family dinner and would be honored if they could join. I needed a broad audience, witnesses to the truth, to make sure Daniel and Cassandra couldn't spin their narrative or dismiss my accusations as the ramblings of an incompetent old woman. This wasn't just about Stanford Construction anymore. It was about exposing the true nature of their hearts. The tension in the dining room was a palpable weight, pressing down on everyone present. If you've been following my journey, you know how much I've been through. This is where it all came to a head. Stay tuned to hear the full story of this dramatic confrontation. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you want to see how this incredible saga concludes. We were all gathered around the polished mahogany dining table, the very table Arthur and I had bought together years ago. Chloe and Charles sat opposite Daniel and Cassandra, their expressions a mix of grim anticipation and thinly veiled anger. Mr. and Mrs. Davies, Cassandra's parents, looked a little bewildered, clearly sensing the storm brewing. The roast chicken sat untouched in the center, its aroma failing to lighten the mood. I rose slowly, my hands resting on the table, my voice, though calm, cutting through the strained silence like a sharp blade. Every eye in the room fixed on me. Daniel, I began, my gaze unwavering, I think we need to discuss your recent visit to Dr. Evans and the specialist appointment you arranged for me next Tuesday. Daniel's face drained of color, turning a sickly shade of white. He stammered, his usual smooth composure utterly shattered. Mom, what are you talking about? Cassandra and I were just worried about you. You've been through so much. We just thought a checkup, for your peace of mind. He glanced nervously at Cassandra, who sat rigid, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and defiance. Worried? Yeah, I echoed, a cold edge to my voice. Worried enough to tell Dr. Evans I was suffering from depression and early dementia? Worried enough to arrange an appointment with a geriatric specialist without my knowledge or consent, clearly hoping to have me declared incompetent? I cut through his flimsy excuses, the full force of my indignation finally unleashed. And speaking of competence, Daniel, I also need you to explain the nearly $300,000 that has been siphoned off Stanford Construction's accounts over the past 2 years. Because Arthur knew about it. He knew before he died. A gasp rippled around the table. Mr. Davies, Cassandra's father, a man of integrity, leaned forward, his expression grave, his brow furrowed with shock. What funds, Evelyn? What is she talking about, Cassandra? Without a word, I reached into the folder I had placed discreetly beside my chair. With a steady hand, I distributed copies of the incriminating evidence around the table. Bank statements highlighting suspicious transactions, printouts of emails between Daniel and Cassandra discussing the diversions, and detailed transfer records disguised as vendor payments. The rustle of papers filled the stunned silence. Cassandra, her carefully constructed composure finally crumbling, practically leaped from her seat. This is ridiculous. Wild accusations. You can't prove any of this, Evelyn. Daniel, we need to leave now. Her voice was shrill, desperate. With all due respect, Cassandra, I said, my voice rising slightly but remaining firm. With bank statements, emails, and transfer records, they are not accusations. They are facts. And Arthur left me the company precisely for this reason, to protect it from those who would exploit it. Mrs. Davies, Cassandra's mother, a woman who always prided herself on her daughter's success, stared at the documents in her hand, her face ashen. Her gaze, filled with a mixture of disbelief and growing horror, lifted to Cassandra. Is this true, Cassandra? Is any of this true? Cassandra's composure finally shattered completely. Her face contorted with a mixture of rage and wounded pride. Yes, it's true, she shrieked, her voice echoing in the suddenly small dining room. But we had every right. Daniel was entitled to that company. Arthur never appreciated him, never gave him the respect he deserved. You're incompetent, Evelyn. You're going to run the company into the ground. We were trying to save it. Charles, who had remained silent until now, spoke in a quiet but cutting tone that nonetheless pierced through Cassandra's hysteria. By stealing from it? Cassandra glared at him, absolutely fuming, while Daniel, his face still pale, desperately tried to silence her. Cassandra, stop. Just stop talking. I turned my gaze back to Daniel, my voice softening, infused with a deep sadness. Daniel, why? Your father loved you. He was grooming you to take over. He had plans for you, for your future in the company. He finally broke, tears welling in his eyes, though I suspected they were more for himself than for Arthur. It was taking too long, Mom. He was so sick, and I was afraid he'd sell the company, or that his illness would destroy everything before I could get my rightful place. I just wanted to secure my future. The confession, raw and self-serving, hung in the air. Well, Daniel, I said, my voice hardening once more, you certainly secured something. Now here is your choice. You and Cassandra can both resign immediately. You will repay the embezzled $300,000 with interest within 3 months, and you will cease all interference with Stanford Construction. If you do not agree to these terms, I will press criminal charges. The evidence, as you've seen, is compelling. Cassandra scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. This is a bluff, Evelyn. You wouldn't send your own son to prison. But Mr. Davies, his face grim, quietly warned his daughter, Cassandra, I think you should listen to your mother-in-law carefully. She's right, I affirmed, meeting Cassandra's defiant gaze. I don't want to send Daniel to prison. The thought breaks my heart. But Arthur put his trust in me. The livelihoods of hundreds of employees depend on this company. His legacy, our family's integrity, it all rests on this. I will do what is necessary to protect it. Daniel, his voice laced with bitterness, finally spoke. So that's it? I'm just cut out? Chloe, who had been listening with a simmering fury, couldn't hold back. You stole from Dad while he was dying, Daniel. What did you expect? I held up a hand, silencing Chloe, and looked at Daniel again. I will soften the offer for you, Daniel, if you accept my terms. You can remain as a consultant. Your expertise, your knowledge of past projects could still be valuable, but you will have absolutely no financial access or decision-making authority. You will report directly to me. As for you, Cassandra, I continued, turning to her, my voice unwavering, your position as marketing director is terminated, effective immediately. Your access will be revoked tonight." Cassandra let out an enraged shriek, shoving her chair back so violently it toppled over with a crash. "You can't do this. You old hag, you have no idea." Mr. Harrison, who had arrived quietly after the main course, now stepped forward, his presence a calm but authoritative anchor. "Evelyn's evidence is indeed compelling, Daniel, Cassandra. The criminal charges would be severe. And as for your current employment, Cassandra, Evelyn is now the sole owner and controlling shareholder. She absolutely can terminate your position." Mrs. Davies, tears streaming down her face, reached across the table and grasped Daniel's hand. "Daniel, please, for your own good, for Claire and Leo, consider her offer carefully." The evening ended with unresolved tension, thick and suffocating. Cassandra, still raging, stormed out of the house, Daniel trailing behind her, his head bowed in a mixture of shame and anger. As the door slammed shut, the silence that followed was deafening. Chloe came to me, pulling me into a tight hug. I leaned into her, finally allowing the tears to fall, tears not just for the confrontation, but for my fractured family and the husband who wasn't there to witness his justice. The morning after the tumultuous family dinner, a new resolve settled deep within me. The tears I'd shed with Chloe had cleansed a part of my soul, leaving behind a fierce determination. I channeled every raw emotion, the hurt, the anger, the lingering betrayal, into action. I was no longer just Evelyn, Arthur's widow. I was the new CEO of Stanford Construction. I knew there would be whispers, skepticism from some employees who doubted a homemaker could run a company, but I was ready. I had to be. Dr. Lena Chen met me in what was now unequivocally my office, though the ghost of Arthur still seemed to linger in the scent of aged paper and leather. I sat behind his large, imposing desk, feeling both dwarfed and empowered. "I'm not ready for this, Lena," I confessed, my voice quiet, "but I'm doing it anyway." Lena smiled, a look of profound understanding in her eyes. "That, Evelyn, is precisely what being ready means. It means showing up even when you're terrified." Just then, Liam, the head estimator, knocked tentatively on the open door. He'd heard about the dinner, the commotion. "Mrs. Stanford," he began, his voice respectful, "I just wanted to say, Arthur made the right choice. Daniel, he was always about taking shortcuts. This company needs someone with integrity at the helm." His words were a powerful affirmation, a sign that genuine support existed within the company. I immersed myself completely in every aspect of the business. My days were a blur of meetings with key employees, detailed reviews of ongoing projects, and the arduous task of developing a strategic vision for Stanford Construction's future. I spent hours with the accountants, the project managers, the sales team, learning the nuances of an industry that was once a complete mystery to me. Daniel had, thankfully, moved his personal belongings from his office. The space now felt lighter, less fraught with unspoken tension. However, he had yet to formally accept or decline the consultant position. Cassandra, on the other hand, had been spotted late one night, clearing out her desk. A silent, unceremonious departure that spoke volumes. A few days later, my phone rang. It was Mrs. Davies, Cassandra's mother. Her voice was heavy with shame and apology. "Evelyn, I am so deeply sorry for everything. I can't believe... Well, I can. Cassandra was always ambitious. But this is beyond the pale." She hinted that Daniel was reconsidering, that the reality of his situation had finally sunk in. Then, a text message arrived from Daniel himself, short and to the point. "Can we talk alone?" My heart, though weary, fluttered with a tiny spark of hope. This wasn't just about business anymore. It was about the remnants of family. We met at a neutral cafe, far from the prying eyes of the office. Daniel looked haggard, a shadow of his former confident self. The bravado was gone, replaced by a quiet defeat. He accepted the consultant position, his voice low. "My career would be over if this went public, Mom. I know that now." He promised to repay the embezzled money, acknowledging it would take time. I agreed. I saw resignation in his eyes, but not yet remorse. That I knew would be a longer journey. 2 years later, 2 remarkable years. I stood in my office, Arthur's office, now truly my office. The changes were tangible. The walls, once a muted cream, were now a vibrant blue. a reflection of the new energy pulsing through Stanford Construction. Under my leadership, the company had not only stabilized, but had thrived. We had expanded into new, lucrative markets. Our profitability had increased by a remarkable 20%, and our reputation for quality and integrity had soared. The whispers of skepticism had long since faded, replaced by respect and admiration. It was my 67th birthday, and the office was buzzing with low-key celebrations. Chloe, radiant and proud, arrived with a bouquet of my favorite white roses. "Happy birthday, Mom," she whispered, hugging me tightly. "You've built something incredible here. Dad would be so proud." At the small office party, amidst the laughter and cheerful chatter, I saw Daniel. Our relationship was still a work in progress, fragile but mending. He handed me a small, wrapped gift. Inside was a framed photo, Arthur and me, young and carefree, on our wedding day. It was a thoughtful gesture, a silent acknowledgement of the past and a cautious step towards the future. Cassandra, I learned, had divorced Daniel and moved to Phoenix with Claire and Leo. Daniel now saw his children every other weekend, a heartbreaking consequence of his choices. But without Cassandra's influence, he had slowly, painstakingly begun to rebuild. He had proven himself a capable project manager within the new, stricter confines of his consultant role, earning back a sliver of trust one project at a time. Later, over a quiet cup of tea, Chloe nudged me. "So, Mom, what's next for the legendary Evelyn Stanford? Any plans beyond global domination of the construction industry?" I chuckled, a warmth spreading through me. "While your mother might just be considering a new adventure, there's Frederick, that widower from the garden club. He's a retired architect, quite charming. And I'm thinking perhaps a trip to Italy. No business, just art, good food, and sunshine." Reflecting on everything, I realized I had no regrets about taking over the company. It had been a baptism by fire, a journey fraught with pain and difficult choices, but it had allowed me to discover a strength I never knew I possessed, a purpose beyond what I had ever imagined. It wasn't just about protecting Arthur's legacy, it was about forging my own. At the company holiday party later that year, I stood before the assembled employees, my voice strong and clear. Arthur built this company on values of integrity, hard work, and respect. Those values remain the cornerstone of Stanford Construction. We are a family, a team, and our future is something we build together, brick by brick, with honesty and dedication. As I looked out at the faces, a profound sense of completion washed over me, a deep gratitude for Arthur's final, unexpected gift. It wasn't just the company he had bequeathed me, it was the opportunity to discover my own extraordinary strength, to write a new chapter, not just for Stanford Construction, but for Evelyn Stanford.